Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first What Should You Know About the End of Life Planning Seminar #1. My name is Andrea Bitodier, and our host is Reverend J.R. Covington, and he will bring the purpose and get you started. So sit back, take your notes, and be ready to ask your questions. Reverend Covington.
Thank you so much. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our first end of life planning seminar. We hope that and the very skilled people we've joined together to be a part of this will help you begin thinking about how and what you need to do in terms of end of life planning, not only for yourselves, but your family, and yes, even some friends. Let us have a word of prayer. Our Father and our God, we thank you for this another blessed day. We thank you for all of the efforts that brought persons across the globe to be a part of this very important conversation. Help us that we hear and see will be a blessing to everyone who is here. We do love you and thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Do we have our welcomer here? Pastor Jones or John?
Reverend Covington, I'm available. This is Reverend Span. Trust everyone is well tonight.
Yes, sir.
Just bringing greetings and thanks for a well-needed event. Our church, as you all know, experienced significant loss, and if ever was a time for us to have this opportunity to learn more information and insight, this is the time. So I just applaud Reverend Covington and his team to bring this forward on times like these. This is probably overdue, probably even prior to COVID, because so many calls come to our office around these particular questions, looking for expertise, advice on needing to understand what to do when these situations happen. So kudos to this team and welcome on behalf of our senior minister, Dr. Clifford Jones, and excited to hear information and get insight on things that I want to learn more about too as well.
Thank you so much. Let us now have introductions. Most of all, if not all of our panelists are people I've worked with for 25 years. And I'm proud that they've given us some time tonight, starting with Mr. Alfred Alexander.
Good afternoon, good evening. Alfred Alexander, president of Alexander Funeral Home. Should I proceed from that, sir, or do you just want an introduction as terms of?
Tell us about what not only you do as a funeral home, particularly as it relates to end of life planning.
Okay.
Particularly like you did with me.
First of all, I'd like to thank Friendship Baptist Church, your senior pastor, and of course yourself for putting this together with your wonderful team. I think this is overdue, as been stated earlier. Everybody needs to know about what to do and how to do it when you deal with death, dying, and actually living, so you can do it before you actually need it. I actually attended Friendship many years ago when it was on Brevard Street. I lived on Stonewall Street and I walked to church. I was, started in this business when I was 9, when we were doing actually emergency ambulance service and taking your loved one home for visitation. So I guess I've been around for a while. In doing funerals and doing pre-needs, you have basically 4 types of pre-needs. You have inflation-proof, trust-funded, you have inflation-proof insurance, you have standard insurance, and standard trust fund. When I say a trust fund, of course, your money is put in a bank account of your choosing or the choosing of the funeral home. There's a $20 fee that is charged by the North Carolina State Funeral Service Board. And of course, that protects your investment, meaning that I can't go to the grocery store, I can't go buy lunch. It is protected, locked in place, where only time it can be used is when you actually die, need it. So don't worry about it, it's a good investment. A lot of people do it because it locks in certain costs that we can't change as funeral homes. Meaning that if it's merchandise, professional services, we can't adjust them, readjust them when you die. Today, if it's $1,000, it has to be $1,000 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. Now, things that we have no control over, like death certificates, merchandise, the escort service to the cemetery, they do that. We have no control over that. So those kind of items, you may want to adjust what you put in your pre-need to cover some of those things. Cemeteries, of course, generally don't want you to pre-need a service in terms of they want to deal with you directly at need. So you wouldn't necessarily put monies away as it relates to what you're dealing with your cemetery on. Unlike cemeteries generally want their money up front. Funeral homes have a tendency to be able to wait a little longer in terms of if you're using insurance or if you have some other way of handling your service, and I'm talking about at needs now, pretty much. But a funeral contract that is done through a pre-need is protected, is set up at your funeral home. Matter of fact, it's set up on a long form such as this to indicate that you have an actual pre-need. Why should I do a pre-need? Because you want peace of mind. You want to, as the person, have an idea of what's going to happen. Sometimes you go to if not anybody at friendship, but some people will put you in a nursing home or something like that, and you say, well, they need to know that you will be taken care of. Well, sometimes families walk away from you, and they want to know when you are checked in that there is an actual pre-need set up at a particular funeral home. This protects you because, as I said earlier, a lot of times people want to change things, but if you mark your pre-need irrevocable, meaning that this is what you wanted, it can't be changed generally.
All right.
So it's a lot of things that you need to know, and it sounds like they're pulling my chain to stop right now. So go ahead, Doc. I'm sorry.
In ministerial words, we're pulling your coattail. Sister Marjorie Brown, who's an elder attorney.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I'm Marjorie Brown. I've been practicing law for 28 years. I am a specialist in elder law in North Carolina. I'm also a certified elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. As a matter of fact, I am actually the first and only specialist in elder law of color in North Carolina. So that's something that I will take with me, at least first for forever. So in practicing elder law and estate and planning solutions, our goal is to make sure that our clients are able to have everything in place. Brother Alexander has said peace of mind. That is our goal for our clients, is for them to have a peace of mind and going forward and knowing that all of their plans have been made, all of the decisions have been taken care of, and the weight is off of their family. When they have all the documents in place that they need, I call it, literally the ultimate love letter to your family. What's the best thing that you can do for your family? Have everything taken care of so they don't have to worry about things. So I talk all over the state of North Carolina. I've been on PBS. I truly love what I do. I serve on Elder Abuse Task Force in Cabarrus County. My office is in Cabarrus County, but again, I'm all over the state. And I love working with the seniors, and I love what I do. I do have to put a disclaimer out today, is that anything that I talk about today is going to be based on North Carolina law. If you are on this event from another state, whether it be any other state other than North Carolina, then I will not be addressing anything specific to you, because I'm licensed in North Carolina and will only be addressing North Carolina issues here.
Thank you very much. Glad to have you. Miss Emma Allen.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Emma Allen, and of course, a proud member of Friendship since I was 18 years old. I own Emma Allen State Farm Insurance Company located right here in Charlotte on Monroe Road. And I was calculating just before this event, how long I've been at this financial services work. And I'm stunned to say that it's 38 years. So clearly I must have started when I was a baby. But what we do all day, every day really is make sure that our folks in particular have the information that they need in order to be able to be financially sound and make some good decisions. One of the things that we're doing more than anything right now is really life insurance reviews, free life insurance reviews for people who don't have life insurance with us, which is really kind of unusual. Most people don't want to do that. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. But what we're finding in these reviews is really astonishing and frankly pretty disturbing. But I look forward to talking more about that and sharing with this great panel this evening.
Thank you so much, Emma. Brother Mac Kennedy.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. My pleasure of being here. I've been in the life insurance industry business since 1971 as a life insurance agent advisor. And primarily what I do, I work with families, and I've been in the business for a while. And one of the things that I like to lift up and point out is that whenever a loved one dies, the one thing that you want to be able to do is grieve. And if you don't have your affairs in order, that could very well affect your ability to grieve. And when you have the proper plan in place, it gives you the opportunity to see your loved ones off in a manner in which you could appreciate. And so what I usually do, I'll sit down with you at your kitchen table. We'll do a needs analysis to make sure that every T is crossed, every I is dotted. And I found over the years, most families are either underinsured or have no insurance at all. And I want to say unequivocally that the head in the sand approach when it comes to final expenses does not work. It is an inevitability, and it's something that you need to take on and realize that it's not going away, and you need to be prepared. And one of the ways to do it is to have the proper instruments in place. And so whenever something like that occurs, you want as smooth as a transition as possible. And I look forward to answering any question that you might have. But the main thing is life insurance, it is for the living.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Brother Palmer Dupree, from taking some time out from your island vacation to share with us tonight.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Friendship Church family. I bring you greetings from the Ebenezer Missionary Baptist Church family, as well as from the staff of Long and Son Mortuary Service, where I have been affiliated with over that many years. I enjoy what I do and love every family that we come in contact, making sure from the first call until the last call that we serve them with dignity, pride, and respect, and making sure that they are very satisfied with their choosing of what type of service that they would like at that time for their loved one. We take it very seriously and do not try to mislead anyone. We want to make sure they understand everything that is going on pertaining to from insurance, pertaining to cash fund arrangements, any type of arrangements, we are there for them. And I'll continue to let you continue on with your seminar, and I will step in when needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brother Raphael.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raphael Bigby. I'm currently employed at Forest Lawn West Funeral and Cremation Service. Retired Navy, 20 years of service to our country. And I've been in the industry the last 13 years, so this is my second career. I've been at Forest Lawn West, well, affiliated with the company my entire time as a funeral director. And tonight I want to answer any questions that you all may have concerning cremation. I deal with pre-arrangements, traditional funeral services that end with cremation, as well as burial. And I hope to enlighten some people on the fact that, you can have a traditional service and cremation to follow as well. That's all.
Thank you so much. To the junior member of our panel, Brother Damon Miller.
Good evening, everyone. Damon Miller here with the Gethsemane Cemetery and Memorial Gardens located there on Sugar Creek. I am an honorary member of the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church there, giving greetings to Dr. Clifford Jones, to Reverend Covington and his staff. Thank you so much for allowing us to be with you all today. I am a senior pre-planning specialist there at Gethsemane Cemetery. And we call it specialist because we do special things for our families there at our location there on Sugar Creek. We honor the life of the person who has passed on with their favorite things, a dove release ceremony, top of the class there at our particular cemetery. And I have served many, many, many families there of the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. And thank you so much for allowing me to serve you. And with the Friendship Church family, we have offered there at our cemetery, when you pre-plan, and you can pre-plan your cemetery property there, we give you a free space if you buy a space for our Friendship Church family there. So that's an offer that we want to throw out to all of you, that you will get a free space if you purchase a space with us there at Gethsemane. I just want to tell you there are 4 things that you need in the cemetery. That's going to be your space, your vault, which your casket sits inside of there at the cemetery. You may get it from the cemetery or the funeral home, your memorial marker, and your opening and closing of the grave. And we'll dive more into that later on in our segment with any questions that you have. But thank you, and I'm honored to be here on tonight.
All right, let's dive into the questions. Sister Brown, when one is listed as a beneficiary on an insurance policy, will they have to pay the IRS? Unmute.
Somebody was leaving my office, so I wanted to keep it quiet.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so everything is guaranteed, death and taxes. But this is one of those areas where you don't have to pay. Life insurance proceeds are not taxed. If you were to get those life insurance proceeds and invest them, or if they were held in an investment and they earned money, then you pay taxes on that gain. So if was paid out $20,000 and by the time you got it, it was $22,000, then you pay tax on that $2,000 gain. But other than that, no, you do not pay taxes on life insurance proceeds.
All right, thank you very much. Brother DeMond, in Mecklenburg County, can families bury their loved ones in their yard? Do they need a special permit to bury the body?
They need to bury someone not in their yard. They do need a special permit if they decide to do so, if they have their private property and they own that particular property. But we suggest that they bury in a cemetery.
Okay. Brother Raphael.
Excuse me, on that same point, you need to be at least 25 yards away from the water table on your property as well.
And the water table is the depth where water appears down under?
Right, correct.
Okay.
And the property line basically is, have to be 25 yards away from the property line so you don't invade the other person's space.
Okay, all right. Brother Raphael, how do I start the arrangement process? My preference is cremation.
Well, one of the first things that has to take place is we get your loved one into our care. Any funeral home, we take your loved one into our care. And normally the funeral home will reach out to the loved one's family, set up a date and time for the arrangements. And then once you come in at that appointment, we will sit down and go over the process with you. Prior to that, though, what I like to do is collect the additional information, all the information that I can on the loved one, and then inform the family on what we're going to need for things such as death certificate, and make sure that we have the next of kin come in when it's a cremation, because not just anyone in the family can authorize a cremation. That's pretty much in every state. Now, if there's someone that has a healthcare power of attorney, and it specifies on that healthcare power of attorney that you have the rights for the final disposition, then yes, someone outside of the next of kin can make that decision.
Okay, good information. Miss Allen, I have a life insurance policy that I want to be used for my funeral expense. What should I do now to ensure that I have a proper funeral and burial without having to pay out of pocket?
Well, we were talking about this a little bit earlier before the seminar started, that the average funeral cost right now is about $10,000. So number one, you want to be sure that you've got adequate coverage and the right kind of coverage. In the life insurance reviews that we were talking about a little bit earlier, what I'm finding is people actually have term policies and they think it's a whole life policy. They think those two things are the same thing. Term, it's really simple. Term is a temporary solution to a permanent problem. A whole life policy is a permanent solution to a permanent problem that we're all going to encounter. And so I would get somebody that you trust, right? To look at what you currently have to be sure, in fact, that you have that thing that you're going to need when the end comes, and to measure that against what we just talked about. Does that seem to be enough money to cover your final expenses? In terms of making sure that your beneficiary does exactly what you want to have happen with that money, I think, Attorney Marjorie would be a great resource there to make sure that that piece is taken care of. Because the fact of the matter is, as much as we hate to think about it, sometimes beneficiaries just don't do the right thing and don't do what you want to have done with the insurance money. So to summarize, check to be sure that you've got the right kind of coverage. I had an 85-year-old last week to come into the office. Their policy, if you can believe this, is expiring at 85. Can you believe that? It's a term policy. We don't want to find that out when we're 85 years old. And so time is of the essence in terms of digging out those policies that you've had for years and having a financial professional take a look at that. And when I say professional, I mean somebody who's been in the business, who owns the product and who knows what they're doing. And no offense to 25-year-olds, but I did have an opportunity to talk to a 25-year-old. I'm not going to name the company. He had sold someone something that he knew nothing about. And so she came into my office reviewing her policies. And I said, let's get this young fella on the phone. And he finally admitted under pressure that he was just selling what his boss told him to sell. He didn't even know what it was. So finding the right professional is always job one in my mind.
Okay, speaking of financing, Brother Canada, you talked to me at one time about a type of insurance that's for end of life purposes. Would you expound on that a little bit?
A plan of end of life purposes, pretty much that would be something that would ensure. I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. End of life purposes.
Well, cost.
Life insurance in general.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, that's pretty much to make sure that you have enough insurance, well, more than enough insurance in place in the event that whenever your loved one passes away. And one of the things that you need to make sure that you do that is have annual reviews. Make certain that once you take out a policy, that you don't just assume that the cost of burial is not going up. As often as you can, and I recommend at least once a year, you get together with whoever your agent is to review your insurance policy, make sure that you have enough coverage in place. And you need to do a needs analysis. You don't need, it shouldn't be a willy-nilly type thing. It needs to be narrowed down to make sure that you have enough coverage so that when something does happen, there will be a smooth transition. And keep in mind also the different types of insurance policies. The number of people think that because of health conditions or health reasons that they can't get insurance. But there are policies that are called guaranteed issue policies that you can pretty much get without answering health questions. Now, those type policies, they are what we call graded policies. They don't go into benefit immediately. It may take 2 to 3 years before they go into benefit. But if you have some serious health conditions and you don't qualify for standard insurance, that is an option. And the other thing to keep in mind is that most people don't get all the insurance that they need at one time. And also keep in mind that when you purchase insurance, it's based on your health, it's based on your age. And one thing you need to make sure that you don't get an insurance policy that you can't afford, because if you buy insurance and you keep it for a couple of years, you lapse it, and you get into that type of a cycle, you're doing things that are not in your best interest. And so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Ms.
Ms. Brown.
JR, if I might, I was just going to offer an easy way to think about this is, what do you want to do with the life insurance policy? Some people want to leave a legacy gift. Some people want to pay off debt. And some people, from an affordability perspective, just want to be buried with that money. And so one of the things that's out now is a final expense policy. It's $10,000. It's meant for burial and nothing more than that. And so if you're not, to Brother Kennedy's point, if you're not willing at this point to have a larger life insurance policy, and you're really just worried about burial, the final expense policy is a really inexpensive and a great way to go. And by the way, no exam is required. And so it's really a great product that people ought to consider if they're thinking about, how do I kind of just, get buried, quite honestly, and not worry about the other things, or maybe I have insurance for the other things. And at least at State Farm, our final expense policy, the wonderful thing about it is 15 days to pay out. That's unusual. And so your family and friends aren't worried about waiting for the life insurance money to come in, because some of my funeral home customers tell me that, sometimes, they wait and don't get that money. So to have that money in hand in 15 days is pretty powerful.
All right.
And to your point, it's also important to know this. If your policy is in what we call a contestability period, that period being 2 years, sometimes people take out insurance and they will assume it's a benefit. But if you haven't had that policy for 2 years, and if the company finds out that something was omitted, there is a possibility that the only thing that you will get from that policy is the premium that you paid in. So in most cases, policies that are over 2 years old can't be contested. But within that 2 year window, they can be.
That's right.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, how important are estate trusts?
The lawyer term is it depends. So it depends upon what is it that you need it for. Individuals who have disabled children or disabled family members that they're trying to provide for, then a trust is a good idea. People get trusts if they're trying to avoid probate. They want to try and make it somewhat easier. And so on their family to avoid the probate process. Some people want to avoid probate because they don't want their information out there in the public realm. But in my world, it's truly depending upon what it is that you need it for and whether or not it's the best idea. Because there's different types of trust, revocable and irrevocable. I tell people, Medicaid, if you reached an age of at least, I'll say 65, I myself do not recommend an irrevocable trust, simply because you have to have a 5-year look back, and an irrevocable trust, that's the only type of a trust that Medicaid will accept. And if you can promise me that nothing's going to happen to you for 5 years, or that you can afford your care out of pocket for that 5 years, and once you put it into an irrevocable trust, then we can do it. Nobody can promise me that. So we normally, try and figure out another way around it to provide for, loved ones who may have a disability or something to that effect.
Thank you. Brother Palmer, are there finance options for funerals?
There are. You can go through, there are some finance companies that will finance funerals. And if that's not the one that you would want to use, because one is specifically for funerals, which is called, can't get it off the top of my head right now, but there's one, and that's all they do is finance funerals. If not, then you can go to your own financial institution and take out a personal loan to finance the funeral itself, and you make those financial arrangements directly back payment to them. So there are some companies out there that provide that type of a service.
All right. Brother Raphael, if I have a prepaid burial package, why won't a funeral home accept it? Tried to get a local funeral home to talk to me about things I would still need to do, and they refused.
Probably because that funeral home is going to lose money by taking that package if it was done elsewhere. Most funeral homes will accept a prepaid package if it's from another funeral home, because generally now most funeral homes do what's called a Preneed insurance policy. which, you know, we've heard of those before. The funeral home I work for, that's what we primarily do. But we will, because, you know, families take these out with the guarantee that their services and merchandise will be guaranteed. But let's say I move to another state, then I want to choose a funeral home that's going to accept that. There are cases where funeral homes say, no, it's just going to cost too much to accept what you paid for. Let's say you paid $3,500 15 years ago for this particular policy. Yes, it has grown and matured some, but it's with the inflation costs, and we see this every day, especially with gas now, for example. Sometimes funeral homes feel like they're going to take a loss. They don't look at the point that this is a service to our community, to a family.
They also may not be licensed to do a pre-need. You have to be licensed to do pre-needs with your particular state. And if you aren't licensed to do so, you may be afraid to handle something that you aren't properly licensed to do.
Okay, let me stay with you for a moment, Alfred. If funeral arrangements have been prepaid, estimated cost at the time, pre-COVID, will the family be obligated to pay for any differences, or will the initial cost be honored?
Well, like I said earlier, I cannot change my professional services based upon it being anything that happened after the pre-need was done. So I'm kind of stuck. Like Chuck, I can't change anything because it's against the law.
Okay, all right. Sister Brown,
Yes,
do
sir.
banks still freeze bank accounts of the deceased?
When you say freeze, I guess what you're referring to is basically block it so that nobody can go into that account. There are times where they will say that nothing else can happen because they're trying to make sure nobody takes those funds. If you've got an account where it's a joint account, then a lot of banks these days are taking into their policy that even though you meant for it to be joint, it's joint with a right of survivorship. And so those funds will automatically transfer over to the joint owner. You have bank accounts where they're payable on death. Those won't be frozen because those funds will be transferred or paid upon death to the person that you've named. But can they freeze an account for a single individual and not allow any transactions? Yes, they can. That is possible.
Okay. Brother Damon, what are payment options for locking in pre-burial packages?
Absolutely. So you can put $100 down on a space and make monthly payments until you pay it off. We give you 1 year free of interest to pay off your space. We can hold that account up to 4 years. It's totally up to you how long you wish to pay for that. But what it does, it locks in today's price. Cemetery cost goes up every year and it doubles every 10 years. Okay, so it's good to pre-plan, to lock in today's price, make a monthly payment until you pay it off. With our cemetery, if you are making monthly payments on a particular space, we're able, if something were to happen to your loved one, to use your life insurance policy to cover the remaining balance that you owe on that particular space at that time of death. So it's great to go ahead and pre-plan, lock in the price, make a monthly payment.
Right. Sister Alma, how do I ensure my offspring will get everything without going to probate? Also, Sister Marjorie, if you would echo in on this one as well.
Okay.
I don't have anything there. I would have to defer to our sister Marjorie Brown on the probate question.
Mr. Brown.
So how do you ensure that your children, your offspring, receive everything without going through probate?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, well, there's multiple ways of doing that. So one is creating a trust, okay? Another one is a lot of times we try to, believe it or not, make it as many things non-probate as possible. So bank accounts, you can put your offspring on your bank accounts as payable on death or transfer on death. Then that bank account will pass to them upon your passing. I'm thinking about assets, anything that you've named a beneficiary of, you need to make sure that you've got beneficiaries, because if you don't put a beneficiary up there, it'll pass to your estate, be subject to your debts, and then, go through that process. So you need to make sure that you have names of your children, if that's what you're trying to do, as beneficiaries on your assets. Houses, well, there are these types of deeds that are possible. One is a life estate. Another one is an enhanced life estate that you could put your children on to pass your house to them with an enhanced life estate, pass through without going through probate. Vehicles, I have seen cars titled as joint with the right of survivorship, but I've normally seen that with spouses. I don't know if you can do that with with your child, but if you could do that with your child, then that's another way. So there are a lot of different ways that you can take things from the probate side and move it to the non-probate side and have it pass. It just takes a little bit of extra legwork and thinking in order to make that happen.
All right, back to you, Ms. Allen.
Yes.
Having children entering adulthood 19 and 21, yet are still dependents, also have aging parents 78, 79, and 82, all of whom do not have an end of life plan, with approximately and hopefully 9 years until retirement, seeking guidance on an ideal checklist that provides successful assistance and comfort for my parents, children, and self. That was a big one.
So on the young people thing, this is something I'm so passionate about. Buy that life insurance for them right now, because life insurance is age driven. And so for my kids, for my grandkids, for my nieces and nephews, I've bought them these policies that are permanent policies. The payment's never going to change. So the payment's going to be the same when they're 3 as it is when they're 83. Get life insurance early for the young people. And it's not about death. And so what I hear lots of times from people is, I don't want to get life insurance on my kids and grandkids because it's the jinx. Well, that's ridiculous, right? It's not the jinx. And life insurance is not about death, it's about life. So for example, for my young grandson, his life insurance is what I'm going to use for his college education, assuming he doesn't get a swimming scholarship, which he's not likely to do since he comes in last every Saturday. So I'm going to take that cash value out of that life insurance policy and pay for his college education. What a gift. That's a legacy. And his policy is $35 a month. So not intrusive at all. There's a new policy that is a whole life policy that you pay for a limited period of time. So it acts like a term policy in that you only pay for it for a certain term, but you're finished with it and it lasts the lifetime. So in his case, I've got a 10-year policy for him, whole life. It coincides with the time that he's going to be going off to school. I'm going to take that cash out of that policy, pay for that college education, and the death benefit belongs there. And so it's really a relatively new product on the market right now. And so I would say, find a great place to buy some life insurance for your young folks early on and buy it now, and buy it from a reputable company. Do not buy life insurance from somebody who makes baby food. I'm not going to name them, but you know who they are. And it's somebody that, we always turn to, but I would not be buying life insurance from somebody who didn't specialize in it. For example, State Farm's #1 in the country in life insurance. And so find somebody reputable, find somebody that you trust. For our older adults, let's look at what they've got, because that's critically important. They may feel like they've got something that's appropriate. We need somebody to review that. And then we need to find some solutions, because there are solutions for older adults around burial or whatever they really want to accomplish based on their budget.
Okay.
And I want to
Brother Alexander?
Yes.
And I think in some cases, you and I have had to deal with this, where a family comes, grandmama, mama has an insurance policy, and they want to use the insurance policy to pay for the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work if there's a beneficiary by name? How can they be, if the word is forced to use it for those expenses?
A beneficiary cannot be forced to use any policy for a funeral. That's a misnomer.
All right.
They have to agree to do it. So it's not like I can force you, family can't force you. So that's why you have to be careful in terms of who you name as a beneficiary. And if you're trying to use that money for a funeral, make sure that they're gonna actually do what you think they're gonna do. That's why you lock into place usually doing a pre-need where you can actually include that policy, if you like, in your pre-need. Some people come in and put a little bit of money on a pre-need and say in it that the remainder will be paid through a policy held with such and such a company, and that takes care of the entire pre-need.
JR, you can also designate the funeral home as a beneficiary.
There you
Correct.
go. Right.
And that has flip-flopped in terms of, at one point, when they started, they allowed that. They stopped it for about 2 or 3 years, came back to now you can put your funeral home down as a beneficiary. So you have to check every few years to see where the state board is on that particular issue.
You can also specify whatever amount you want to go to the funeral home.
Correct.
Okay. So
And
Sister
then-
Brown, in light of that, hold just a minute. In
Well,
light of
one
what
more
we
thing,
just heard, just a minute. Just a
Okay,
minute.
sure.
In light of what we just heard in terms of using insurance for that, sounds like there needs to be some other legal document in place to make sure what that person wants done is done. Is that correct?
Well, an assignment is usually done.
I was asking Ms. Brown.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Ms.
That's
Brown,
okay.
I didn't see you over there. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
No problem. So the issue there is if you name somebody as a beneficiary, then they're going to do what they want. Okay. If you name a funeral home as a beneficiary, then that's going to go to the funeral home, and they're going to use those funds for what you needed them to be done. Once you name somebody as a beneficiary on something, that control is then gone. You can't say, this is what I want to have to do. There are life insurance policy trusts that you can do, an irrevocable one where your life insurance is paid by the trust. It's owned by the trust. And then when you pass, the life insurance pays to the trust, and then the trust can say, this is what happens. So there are different possibilities that can be done.
All right.
I was just
I
gonna
have-
say, JR, that they might want to put a successor beneficiary. COVID taught us that even people who are beneficiaries pass away before that person, even though they're younger. And so a secondary beneficiary might be something that people consider.
Okay. Brother Demont, someone asked a question, if my loved one was cremated, what options do they have for interment, as in a vault, I guess, or in the ground?
Absolutely. You have 2 options. You can bury cremated remains in the ground as well. There is a urn vault that you would use instead of a full-size vault that you will put those cremated remains in the ground. But we also have what we call a niche. A niche is on the side of the mausoleum, above ground burial, where you can put those cremated remains there in a niche, have a vase, your name, date of birth, and date of transition on it as well. So you can have a permanent place where you can go and visit your loved one who has passed away.
All right, Brother Raphael, what is the difference between choosing a crematory service versus a funeral home for crematory services?
Well, with the funeral home, I'll start there. As far as crematory services, that's where you, I'll put it this way, I'll say you're going to have services for your loved one, such as a memorial service or a traditional service with cremation to follow. A crematory is just what it is. They're just going to do what they're going to provide the cremation for you. There are no services provided whatsoever. Maybe the possibility of having an identification viewing, but that's all that you'll receive. But with a funeral home, you can say, like I mentioned earlier when we started, you can have a traditional service, or you can have what's known as an immediate or direct cremation rather, and have a memorial service to follow, or have a traditional funeral with the body present at the church, at the funeral home, and then it will end with cremation versus going to the cemetery.
All right. Brother Dupree, can a deceased loved ones be present when the cremation process is initiated?
Depends on the crematory. They will allow you to view just for the moment, but after the actual remains goes into the crematory, then they will not allow you in there anymore. So you can view up until that period of the time. Yes.
Okay. What should you be told? And I'm just asking the questions that were asked. What should you be told about a pre-need funeral plan, Brother Alexander?
Well, number one, you were told that you need it. It locks in certain costs. So as I said earlier, 10, 15, 20 years from now, things cannot be changed, which means if you walked in at an at-need situation, it's going to be higher cost. Funeral costs are changed every 8 to 10 years. And that means that caskets are going up. They even have a surcharge on caskets at most companies now that is involved in what you're getting if you get a particular casket. Also, you need to think about, I hadn't heard this yet, you can get a grave at a military veteran cemetery, and if you're a veteran, it doesn't cost you a penny. It's free. You get a free outer burial container, you get a free space. You have to have your military discharge, which is the DD 214, that gives you and your loved one, your wife, a space for free. And I always tell people, why you want to buy a grave when you can get one for free? But people do. So you can do whatever you want to do.
Okay. To Ms. Allen, how can I help my elderly parents with end-of-life planning? What are the absolute necessary things to have in order?
You know, Sister Brown is going to help me with this, but I say, number one, a will. Have a will. So many people don't have that. Some people who have it don't know where it is. That's the other piece. Where are the documents? Where are the life insurance policies? Where is the will? Is it in a safe place? Do they have what they need to handle that final expense in terms of life insurance policies and have somebody review it? That's a succinct answer.
So in my world, it changes around a bit. So we're going to take care of, make sure that you have things in place to take care of you while you are here on this earth, to make sure that it's not complicated for your family. So we're going to make sure that you have a power of attorney, and we're going to make sure you have a healthcare power of attorney, because if for whatever reason your parents reach a point where they can no longer communicate, make these decisions, and we don't have these documents in place, you're forced to go to court to be have them adjudicated incompetent and be appointed their guardian. At that point, there is an annual paperwork that has to be filed showing the expenses that have been, paid for their benefit, has to balance down to a penny. When all you had to do earlier on was get this power of attorney and this healthcare power of attorney taken care of. So once we get those taken care of, then we go down to the advanced directive for living will. So where they're saying, this is how I want to leave this earth. This is the decisions that I want, so that you're not having to make those decisions about, is this the proper time? Is this the right time to stop everything? And then have to wonder going forward, is that the right decision that I made? Then we make sure you have the will done. Granted, somebody else had put up there and I responded, what happens if you don't have the will? Well, the general statute says who receives what you have. It may not go to who you want to, but we need to make sure that you have things taken care of while you're here on this earth first. So those are the first documents that we recommend you get done. And then we take care of the will. And the additional thing that we put in the will is we make sure that you have what's called a supplemental needs trust provision in there. And what that says is that if I've left anything to anybody who happens to be on a needs-based benefit, whether it's a veteran's benefit, whether it is Medicaid, then whether it's SSI, then what I've left them goes into a trust for them and is held for them. That way they don't lose their benefits. And they're still able to reap the benefits of what you've left for them, but they're just not in their name, and they lose their benefits. So there's a different order. I listen to everybody talking, but everybody has their different order of things, but that's the order that I like to do, is take care of things while you're here on this earth. Then we take care of things after you left this earth. And then we make sure that what you have left does not hurt anybody that you have left behind when you're gone.
Brother Dupree, what charges are due the funeral home if you are cremated and your remains are given to your family, but you choose to have a memorial service thereafter, if you are not going to use any of their facilities?
Can you repeat that for me again?
Sure.
Thank you.
What charges are due the funeral home if you are cremated and your remains are given to your family, but you choose to have a memorial service thereafter, if you're not going to use any of their facilities?
If you're choosing cremation and the family receives the cremains and they're going to have memorial service at another location, it's not necessary that the funeral home has to be present for that memorial service. So there wouldn't be any charge from the funeral home. A family can have a memorial service at another location without the presence of a funeral director or funeral home staff member at all. At that point, it's entirely up to them. They can have a memorial service in their backyard. Right after having a cookout, then all of a sudden they want to have a memorial service for that loved one. So there would be a cost from the funeral home once we have delivered the cremains back to the family. Only if you're having a memorial service at our facility, or you have a memorial service at a church where you require our staff to be present, then you would incur a cost.
Raphael, question is, who makes the decision if someone, say, dies in Charlotte, but they want to be shipped to another place, as in another state or where they're from, to be buried? How does that process work?
Well, that would be the next of kin or whoever's designated in the family. So if there's a number of children, the majority, but someone is going to make that final decision of where your loved one is going to be buried. The funeral home locally, let's say here in Charlotte, would assist the family. We would reach out to the receiving funeral home for the family as well. And we were just going to abide by the wishes of the deceased or the loved one's family members. So it just depends on who's in charge. Now, we've heard about the healthcare power of attorney. I mentioned it earlier, and some others have mentioned it too. So that does make a difference. So if someone presents a healthcare power of attorney that says a certain family member has the final rights to make a decision for the disposition of their loved one, that's the one that's in charge. That's who makes those decisions. The funeral home is just going to assist.
Okay. How do you help your elderly parents or other relatives to prepare with life-ending needs? Matt, what would you advise someone who is aware that there's not something in place? How would you advise someone to talk to their elderly parents or otherwise in terms of putting something in place?
Well, the first thing you got to do is find out a way to get into their business, because so many of our elderly parents, they don't want you in their business. And so once you can get past that, and once you can convince them that what they have isn't what they think they have, you pretty much go from there. And I have found out in talking with people, quite often people have these accident policies, they're paying $10 per month, and they think they've got enough insurance. And then whenever the loved one dies, they find out that it's an accident policy and it doesn't cover natural causes. You got to find a way to get them to open up, to tell you what it is that they have. And you have to have a way to show them that it's how important it is, not just for them, but for you who's going to be responsible for taking care of their affairs, how important it is to have something in place. And, you just have to have a checklist, of some do's and some don'ts for what's going to happen if you don't have this in place. And that's pretty much how I approach it. You know, once I can find out what they have, and once I can convince them what they have is not enough, you know, usually they will buy into it and take the necessary steps to ensure that that the transition will be smooth.
And can I interject with
Yes,
that
sir.
as well?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Candidate, that's a good point, because we as a people, with our loved ones, and of course, as you said, with the seniors, and it's not only the seniors,
Yeah.
it could be anyone in the family. And you want to make sure that they know what they have, as you stated, because they don't want to come to the table at the funeral home at the last moment and you have nothing and you have to pass the hat around. That's the most embarrassing part of a funeral arrangements, when a family member comes in and they assume that the other loved one, the deceased, had it. And so at that point, then they start thinking about the other relatives. What do I need to do, you know, so that we don't run into this situation again? So it is very important that you do get more comfortable with that loved one that you really care about, and you really don't want to see something negative happen at the end of the day.
Can I say one quick thing? I found a really easy way is to say, I'm going to introduce you to this non-threatening insurance professional. She's not obliged to give you any information about anything that we've talked about. And so if you would talk to her, I don't have to have the information. I've been really successful with some of my seniors to say, listen, this is between you and I. And if you want to have me tell them, I'll tell them. If you don't, you don't. That seems to break the ice sometimes.
And another thing too, I found out quite often, people have insurance policies and they haven't changed the beneficiary.
That's
So
right.
that beneficiary that are deceased or that they no longer have a relationship with. And so that's a pretty awkward and a bad situation to find yourself in also.
That's
This
right.
is a two-part question. And for the funeral directors, what happens when someone that is dear to you, whether it's necessarily a parent, an aunt, or someone who doesn't have anyone to take care of their expenses, have no insurance? What options do they have? They're not the direct, they're not an heir, they're not a direct relative, maybe somebody that took care of them as a kid. What do you do when you have nothing?
Well, one thing is to sit down with a funeral home and try to work out a plan if you don't have one. In terms of kind of like what Damon mentioned about paying something down and paying monthly and that kind of thing. The other thing is to go to the Catholic diocese, who they provide a graveside service for that person or a cremation for that person if you have nothing. And I think they ask you to bring in about $800 or something like that. And they will then say to you, you can't have a regular type service. You can only have a graveside service. You can only have a cloth covered casket. You cannot dictate to the funeral home or anybody else what's going to happen. They provide you a grave at the city cemetery. And that's when you actually have nothing. You have no, sometimes you don't even have relatives. You have no one that's going to take care.
Chess, did we lose the sound?
No, I think it's Mr. Alexander's.
I can hear you okay, John.
Okay,
If I could chime in with Mr. Alexander.
certainly, go ahead.
He did mention Catholic Charities, the diocese, the Charlotte diocese. Yes, they do provide what's known as an immediate burial or a direct cremation. And
Right.
As he was saying, you cannot have any additional services. They won't even allow the funeral homes to issue a death certificate to the family. They have to get that on their own. But now, me being a retired service member, there is something known as a indigent case where, you know, if this person has no loved ones, they have no home, some funeral homes will provide a free service and a free burial, just as Mr. Alexander mentioned earlier, at one of the national cemeteries. So there are different things that can be done. We also mentioned earlier about taking out loans, but in a case like this where there's no loved ones, there's no family, you know, it's up to the funeral home to have what's called compassion and then take on a charity case. It happens.
Correct.
Okay. Brother Damon, how do you know where the cost is in a cemetery? Sounds like they're meaning, are there different costs where the remains are placed in a cemetery?
Absolutely. There are several different costs. I can only speak for Gethsemane Cemetery. We have 6 different gardens there in our cemetery. Each garden have a different price point. So depending on where you choose depends on that price point of that particular space. So if you've been at our cemetery, the closer you get towards the water, the more expensive the properties are. So you have ocean front or ocean view. It's totally up to you. But, you know, you choose. That's why it's so important for pre-planning, because you get to choose yourself how much you want to spend.
Okay. Ms. Allen, I want to get insurance to cover my children's needs after I'm gone, but I also want it to cover my funeral. How is that arranged?
Well, one of the things you can do is use the beneficiary piece. Certainly, you know, you can have as many beneficiaries as you want. One can be the funeral home to cover the funeral cost piece. And then you can designate, if you've got 3 kids, that you want them to have 25, 25, 25, and the rest go to the funeral home. And to Sister Marjorie's point, you certainly can provide for that in a formal way.
Okay. If someone dies, how much can they expect if they're, Raphael mentioned being a veteran, how much they can expect from the government as far as the cost of a funeral?
Well, there are 2 different things you have to consider. If that retired or veteran dies in a VA establishment, the VA is going to cover some of the cost, whether it's at a hospital or nursing home, things of that nature. The VA will cover some of the cost. But the norm would be to expect, of course, a flag, a free government marker, just as Mr. Alexander mentioned earlier, depending on where you're buried, of course. Well, not depending on where you're buried, but at any cemetery. I don't know of a cemetery that won't accept it. But now cemeteries do vary with what they charge for the installation of markers and things of that nature. But if you don't pass away at a VA facility, you can expect to pay for regular costs of a service unless that funeral home provides a discount for the veterans or that active duty member. Now, as an active duty member, I don't know if people know, there's really no cost that the family is going to incur if someone dies in the line of duty.
Right.
So that's pretty much it. Again, your loved one would have to die in a VA facility for them to cover a portion. And just also to add to that, the family 9 times out of 10 are going to have to pay upfront, and then they will file a claim with the Veterans Administration, and they will reimburse a portion to the family.
Okay. This is for our two insurance agents. My aunt lived a long time, but somewhere along the line, she stopped making payments on her insurance. And when she died, we assumed that she had insurance, but we're told that payments had stopped and therefore the insurance was no longer in place. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, you know, go ahead, Brother Kennedy.
What I'm going to say, when you get something like that, make sure you get it in writing from the company. Secondly, oftentimes when people carry insurance policies for a number of years, they go on what we call extended term. If it's a whole life or a cash value policy, even if the policy is lapsed, there may be enough cash value in the policy to carry it for a certain number of years. And so whenever you contact the company, whatever answer that they give you, make sure that it's in writing. I mean, that may be true. And I guess if it's the agent that's telling you that, just make sure that you have that in writing, because more times than not, sometimes people don't think they have insurance, and they actually do, because it's on what we call extended term insurance. And so even though that can extended term, it can carry a policy as much as 10 or 15 years if it has that much cash value. So but bottom line is just make sure whatever answer you get, make sure that it's in writing.
Well, and
Go ahead.
I would echo exactly that. The cash value in the policy can be used to pay premiums. And there is also a notification clause, so that if Emma Allen is, incapacitated, 90 years old, and have missed 3 payments, then I have notification going to my beneficiary that I've not made those payments, so that they can take action on that. The other piece of it is that's the beauty of having a whole life policy that ends early, so that you're finished paying for that thing. It's a fully paid up policy, and you're not worried about having to make life insurance policies when you may not be in a mental position to be, or economic position, frankly, to be able to do that.
And on top of that, and life insurance policy, if you're not able to make the payments as a result from being disabled, policies have what we call waiver of premium. And if you qualify for a waiver of premium, the insurance company will pay your premium for you for as long as you're disabled, as long as you prove that you are disabled.
Right.
Sister Brown, how does a living will work, and how do you get one?
So a living will is also called an advance directive. So that's where you're making your end of life decisions. So specifically, you're saying whether or not you want extraordinary methods to be used if you're not conscious and you have an incurable condition that's going to result in your death in a relatively short period of time, or if you are in a persistent vegetative state and the doctors say that you're not going to wake up, or if you are at potentially the end stages of Alzheimer's. Do you want extraordinary measures to be used to keep you alive? You're answering these questions. Do you want to have an IV or a feeding tube? Do you want, if you're an organ donor, do you want to be an organ donor? Also, if you have a healthcare agent, do you want the doctors to listen to this document right here? Or do you want them to listen to your healthcare agent? So that specifically is what that document is. Where can you get one? You can get one from an attorney's office. You can get one, the hospital pastoral care, they have them as well. And then the North Carolina Secretary of State, their website, believe it or not, that's where you can print one out. It has to be notarized and witnessed by 2 people, but that's an easy place to locate that document.
Okay. Mr. DeMond, how do you decide who is the person that makes decisions when a loved one dies?
We decide, just like the funeral home, whoever the next of kin is, whether that's a spouse, whether that's a child, or the next of kin can be whomever is stated in their healthcare power of attorney, as well as Raphael has stated before.
Brother Alexander.
Yes.
Why are some funerals, the remains closed and some are open? Why do they keep them closed?
Well, that's the family's decision. Some families come in with the idea, just like with cremation, they want the person not viewed at all. It was the wishes of the person who died, not to be viewed, not to be looked at, etc. But bodies, families, your loved one belongs to the family, not to us. We're your agent when you contact us.
Mm-hmm.
So you determine what you want to do, not us.
Okay. Ms. Allen, my understanding is insurance goes directly to the beneficiary and not the estate.
Well, the insurance policy is going to go to who you designated to go to. So if you designate it to go directly to the estate, that's where it's going. If you designate it to go to Emma Allen as your beneficiary, that's where it's going.
And if you don't put anything down at all, if you don't put a name down at all, it is going to go to your estate.
Right.
As far as beneficiary.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's when somebody in the family needs to go to the clerk of court's office and set up a situation, because otherwise it's going to go to the state, you'll never see it. But anyway, go ahead.
And also, if you haven't changed the beneficiary, whoever's on that, whoever's designated, whether you like them or not, they're the ones who will get the proceeds.
Correct.
Also, some insurance companies will allow the next of kin to act as a beneficiary, even if there's not one name, just so that the funeral bill can get paid, and then whatever remaining funds will go to the estate. So some insurance companies will allow a next of kin to act as the beneficiary without one being named. It just depends on what insurance company that it may be.
Yeah.
I would really encourage folks to put a beneficiary down, because that is going to be a world of hurt for whoever that is. Could figure it out who that beneficiary is, who's going to step in, and it's a path you don't want to go down.
All right.
But I've heard,
To ref, go ahead.
now I said, I've heard whoever wants to be responsible for the bill, they can be the beneficiary.
This is for Raphael and any of the funeral directors. Why are more African Americans choosing cremation in term as opposed to traditional burial?
Because we are finally, we've been enlightened. It's been taboo for years. I would say as African Americans, we are pretty traditional when it comes to services, and we like closure. But I think a lot of people are getting on board now because they understand they need to live after taking care of a loved one's services. And in past years, we've seen GoFundMes, we've seen food drives, everything trying to raise money to take care of their loved one's services because they didn't have the proper things in place, such as insurance, which is a big deal. So we have families that are choosing to go the cremation route. And also some of them feel like, you know, it's just not necessary. They have the financial means to do it, but they feel like it's just not necessary to go through the traditional service. I would rather just be cremated.
All right. We've reached a point where we want to give each of you a chance to have some final statements about either the subject we talked about or something you feel may be even more beneficial than has already been shared. Let's start with Brother Alfred.
Well, thank you. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. We at Alexander look forward to serving all folks, black, white, green, yellow, whatever. We do it all. We try to provide a service that is economical. We are very respectful to what your wishes are. And we also want you to save money. You don't need to put a lot of money in the ground or in a cremation. What kind of drove most cost on cremation also was the fact that most cemeteries prices went up sky high and people can't afford to do both in terms of the way they want your person to be honored and then the way the cemetery costs are high. Some cemeteries are willing to work with you, some others aren't. I won't name any, I just know that that's the case. But at Alexander, you can contact us. You can see us on our website at alexanderfunerals.com, and you can also see our general price list. Every funeral home in America has a provided general price list when you walk in the door. If they don't, run, because they don't want you to know something. So it's like you need to actually visit the service, see who you're talking to, see who you're talking with. If you want to do a whole funeral online, you can do that with Alexander. Thank you very much again. God bless you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sister Brown.
Yes, sir. So, you know, we talked about the documents beforehand. I'm just going to reiterate them one more time. We make sure that you have the documents in place while you're here on this earth. Okay, the durable power of attorney, the healthcare power of attorney. We also make sure that you have a HIPAA waiver so that the people that you need to talk to the doctors are able to talk to the doctors. You have the advanced directive or a living will. Then you have your last will and testament. Again, the last will and testament should have a supplemental needs trust provision in there to protect those that are left behind. Also, tell people, you know, if you feel like you need a trust, and I'm answering somebody right now, you know, if it's privacy that you're concerned about, there may be a trust, and it's going to be a revocable living trust if you are over the age of 65, unless you have impeccable health, like I said, and can promise me that you won't get sick for 5 years. Otherwise, you're looking at a revocable living trust where you can put things in and take them out. We tell people, I'm gonna tell you now, if you already have these documents done, take them out. You know, whether it's mentally or actually take them out and hold them in your hands and look at who you named as your power of attorney. Look at who you named as your healthcare agent. Look at who you named as your executor, and make sure these are still the people that you need, that you want to have in that position. If you named your spouse as your power of attorney, your healthcare power of attorney, and they now are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, it's time to make a change, because you need to make sure you have somebody named that can handle things for you if you cannot. So on an annual basis, whether it's your birthday, New Year's, whatever it is that you want to take it out, and whether it's physically or mentally, hold those papers and think about those people that you've named and whether or not a change needs to happen.
Thank you. Ms. Allen?
So I would say get a review by somebody that you trust. That's the number one thing that you can do. People are often ashamed because they think that a question is a dumb question. No question is a dumb question. Get to people who know what they're talking about, as opposed to our cousin around the corner who also had an experience and knows all about life insurance. I hear that all the time. Let's do better than that and get a review. Share where the documents are. The last thing your loved ones want to be doing is looking for your documents when something happens to you. So either let them know where the documents are, or let them know who the trustee is. Like, you know, Sister Marjorie, for example, select a successor beneficiary, because if something happens to your beneficiary, you need to know who's next in line, and then buy early as you can on the life insurance piece, but it's never too late.
Brother Candidate.
I would urge everyone to not shy away from the conversation. Quite often we don't want to talk about the inevitable. And I think you owe it to yourself and to your loved ones to have that conversation, to make sure that everything is in good order, to make sure that your wishes are carried out, and to take some of the burden off of your family while you're in sound mind. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. As often as you can, review your policies, make sure that everything is as you think it is, your beneficiaries. Don't assume that everything is okay. Have the conversation with the ones who are going to be responsible for you in the event that something happens. Just make sure everything's in good order. Don't shy away from the conversation.
Thank you. Brother Dupree.
Just like to thank everyone for allowing me to be a part of this program this evening. I'd like to thank the Friendship Church family and all those that have participated as well. We are Long and Son Mortuary Service, 2312 Badersford Road, have been there since 1968, been in business since 1947. Just want to make sure that, you know, all the people do check out the funeral home, check out prices, make sure you know what type of service that your family wants. You're more than welcome to come into our facility. We are available 7 days a week. You can always reach us. Just want to make sure that you know what you're getting, when you're getting, and the type of service that you want as well. Because once you're gone, you never know what the loved one that you left to do for you may be doing. So you want to make sure you get your things together and in writing as well. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Brother Raphael.
First, I want to say thank you to Friendship for asking me to be a part of this. One of the things I want to leave with everyone, prearrange your services. That's one of the things that you can do for your family before you make your transition, no matter when it's going to take place. Because I see this often where family members come in, they don't know what to do and they don't know what decision to make. I don't know what mom or dad would like. I don't know what my sister or brother would like to do. They didn't share these things with me. But if you come in and you prearrange your services, you've already got it laid out there for them. That takes a burden off of your family. They don't have to make all those hard decisions. Now, I'm located at Forest Lawn West Funeral and Cremation Service, where Forest Lawn West Cemetery is, that a lot of people don't know that there's a funeral home there also. You can stop by anytime. The number there is 704-395-0055. Again, I'm Raphael. We have other directors there as well. Any of us can help you, answer questions for you, even if you don't want to use our funeral home. We can answer questions for you to give you a better understanding on what it is that you're doing when it comes to the end of life process, as far as your funerals or cremation is concerned. And please don't shy away from asking questions. I tell every family that I meet with, there are no dumb questions in this. This is what I do every day. We are the experts. All the funeral directors here that you have witnessed tonight, we're the experts. We're there to help you and to assist you with what you have to do for your loved ones in the end, because we don't want you to leave with regrets in the end. And keep in mind also, when you make these decisions at services, you have to live after you take care of your loved one's final services. Thank you again.
Brother DeMond.
Again, I want to say thank you to the Friendship Church for allowing me to be here tonight. Thank you, Reverend Covington, and your team there, and all of the panelists. Thank you so much for your expertise on tonight. Again, we talk about pre-planning. My aim is to make certain that each and every one of you protect your children, protect your grandchildren from future emotional and financial burdens. I think that's the biggest thing when we pre-plan. You freeze in today's price. You prevent family arguments. You eliminate emotional overspending. And it provides an easy payment option for each and every one of you. I went to Chick-fil-A today and spent $60. You know, you can spend $60 on your space there at the cemetery to make sure that you have your future intact. Whether you are buried or whether you are cremated, Gethsemane Cemetery have a service for you. Ground burial, entombment for your mausoleum, or providing a niche for you for your cremated remains. We are a premier cemetery right there on Sugar Creek. I've served many of your families there from the Friendship Church. Again, we honor the life of the person who has passed away. The reason why I say do it early, we have people that come in our office, Reverend Covington, who don't even know their wife's favorite snack, don't even know their mother's favorite color. Have the conversations in your family so your family members would know. But most of all, come into our office, sit down with us, write everything down so you can have it on paper for yourself. Again, this is a ministry for us and not a job. I think that's very important to understand. This is our ministry. This is what we do. Gethsemane is a garden at the foot of the Mount Olives in Jerusalem, most famous as the place where, according to the Gospels, is where Jesus and his disciples prayed. Won't you come and be buried there at a place where Jesus prayed? Thank you again so much for allowing me to be here on tonight. I left my number in the chat. I will give it to you again. This is my personal number, 980-229-7086. Gethsemane Cemetery, located at 1504 West Sugar Creek Road. May God bless all of you on tonight, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so very much, our panelists, each and every one of you in some way over the last 25 years that I've been working with families at Friendship. You have been a part of that in serving our families, and you're all friends of mine personally. So I'm thankful that you, upon being asked, said you would come and be a part of this. This is something, as I say to everyone at every funeral that I preach, sooner or later, every one of us are going to sit on the front pew in somebody's church in front of a loved one. And Ms. Caldwell and Ms. Bertudier are my team. And in 2 years of COVID, we sat in front of 115 plus families where someone died. And we've seen persons who really just looked like a deer with headlights in their eyes. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know, as Demond said, they didn't know anything of what their loved one had. And they were literally struggling to figure out what they're gonna do to get this funeral done in a short period of time. This is why we're doing this. We don't want any more people to be in wonder about what to do when mama dies or your loved one, your husband, or whomever. And knowing that information is out there, we hope all of you who have graced us by being a part tonight will contact these ladies and gentlemen and take them up on what they've pledged to do. If you need information, pick up the phone, use email, mail, whatever it is, and don't be afraid to ask questions. It's not about having somebody that's dead now, but it's about asking about what may be needed or will be needed when the end comes from each and every one of us. Certainly want to thank Chester, our technical director, Ms. Bertudier, who is our director, and Ms. Caldwell, who is the coordinator. They're my team, and we work together feverishly to minister to families when death comes. On behalf of Dr. Clifford A. Jones Sr., we certainly want to thank all of you for coming and being a part of this, and hope in some way it spurs the need to do it again, because people still need information. So we want to thank you and hope you have a good night. Let us pray.
Reverend Covington, before the closing prayer,
Yes, ma'am.
please. We have a survey
Thank you.
for our audience, and would love to hear from you as to the information you just heard today. And we would love to hear from you. Our brother Chester, would you explain how that will work real quick?
It's already available. Just go ahead and from your Zoom, just enter your responses. We'll keep it up, Reverend Covington, for maybe another minute, for about a minute.
Okay. And again, reminder, this will be available on our website, Friendship Baptist Church website, as well as a YouTube version as well. And I'm told it will be out there on it for perpetuity. So if someone didn't get to come or did not get to be here, let them know they can go to that website and be able to see what we've talked about. Let us pray. Our Father and our God, we want to thank you for allowing us to face the hard reality of life, that sooner or later we will have to take care of a loved one. We thank you for these professionals who minister to people each and every day. We thank you for the insurance agents who prepare people so they are prepared. And we thank you for our lovely attorney who came to share us a lot of information that we need to know and where we can go and get that information. We thank you for everyone that is tuned in. And we hope that something we've done has enlightened them and maybe lighten their burden of being concerned about how to handle end of life issues. We do love you and thank you. We ask this prayer in your son Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Just everyone has a good evening.
All right, good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Have a blessed night.
Good evening.
Amen.
Good evening.
Great job. Great job. Good evening.